Hello and welcome to another video. My name is CJ, the Populist New Yorker, and today we're going to be doing our final election prediction of the 2020 election season. Election day is tomorrow, November 3rd. Please be sure to vote if you are able to. Also, please be sure to check out our election night live stream, which will start 6 p.m. Eastern Time on election day, November 3rd. It'll just be me and a couple of friends doing some commentary and watching the results come in. So please be sure to check that out if you can. So we're going to start off this prediction by going in the Northeast this time instead of the West, and making our way across the country, heading out to California. So we're going to start off with the state of Maine. This is a state that's gotten a fair amount of attention after it was somewhat close in 2016, but I ultimately project the state of Maine will go to Joe Biden by around 5.9 percentage points. Of course, the 2nd district will probably go to Trump by around 6 or 7 points, but either way, I think it will stay in the likely margin. Next, we're going to go to the state of New Hampshire. I think New Hampshire is another state that the Trump campaign hasn't really paid a lot of attention to lately because polls have been very favorable to Joe Biden. Joe Biden will win the state of New Hampshire by around 3.5 percentage points, give or take. Again, these predictions aren't concrete, but this is what I think is going to happen on election day, but it very well could be somewhere around these numbers. The state of Vermont is no contest. Joe Biden will win the state of Vermont by around 34 points, 64.4 to 30.3, somewhere in that range. Next, we have the ultra-competitive state of Massachusetts. The state of Massachusetts will go to Joe Biden by 26.9 percentage points. Donald Trump improving on his, I think, 32% in the last election, getting 35.8. Joe Biden getting 62.7. Again, we have another very competitive state, of course, the state of Connecticut. Joe Biden will win the state of Connecticut by around 17 points. And we have the state of Rhode Island, which Joe Biden will win by 22.2%. Next, we're going to go to the Democratic safe state of New York, my home state. Joe Biden will win the state of New York by around 24 points or so. Donald Trump will actually improve on his margins here a little bit, getting 36.8. But Joe Biden will also improve on Hillary's margins since the third-party vote will be less of a factor. Moving on down to the state of New Jersey, we project the state of New Jersey will go to Joe Biden 57.3 to 41.5, a 15.8 margin of victory for Joe Biden. Next, we have the swing state of Pennsylvania. Now, Pennsylvania is going to be actually pretty close this election, but ultimately, I've given the state to Joe Biden based on the polling and based on the trends that have been going on this election. Joe Biden has been up higher than Hillary Clinton was in this state throughout the entire race. The only polls that have had Trump up are very right-leaning polls, and even some of those polls now that have come out have Joe Biden up very narrowly. So the state of Pennsylvania will go to Joe Biden by 1.9% or a tilt margin, making it one of the closest states so far on our map. Next, we're going to move down to the state of Delaware, Joe Biden's home state. Joe Biden will win the state of Delaware by around 19.6% or 59.2 to 39.6. This state wasn't really going to shift to the right anyway, especially with Joe Biden on the ticket. Delaware still likes Joe Biden a lot, and he's going to overperform Hillary Clinton's margins, and Trump will underperform his 2016 margins. Next, we have the state of Maryland. No surprise, Maryland going to Joe Biden 62.1 to 35.7, a 26.4 margin of victory for Joe Biden. Our nation's capital, a nail-biter. Joe Biden will win the District of Columbia by 86.2% or 91.5 to 5.3. I know Trump had a chance here earlier on, but unfortunately he will get crushed by Joe Biden in the District of Columbia. Next, we have the state of Virginia, not really a swing state anymore. We project Virginia will go to Joe Biden by 9.9% or a high likely margin. Donald Trump getting a little less than he did last time, 44.1% of the vote to Joe Biden's 54%. I think either way, whether this is right or wrong, Joe Biden is probably going to win the state of Virginia much more comfortably than Hillary Clinton. He's more likable than Hillary Clinton, and also Virginia views Trump very, very unfavorably. And, Democratic primary turnout in 2020 was very high in the state, and I don't doubt for a second that they will enthusiastically support Joe Biden for president. We're going to move on down to the state of North Carolina. This I project North Carolina will actually go to Donald Trump pretty narrowly. I think Donald Trump will win the state by around 2, so a little bit less than his 3.6 margin of victory in 2016, 50.3 to 48.3. Again, not really surprising. Joe Biden is only up in the polls around 1 or 2 points, and considering polls almost always in North Carolina, especially the last decade or so, tend to favor Democrats, Republicans always overperform their polls in the state. I think it's no shock that Donald Trump will win the state at the end of the day. Next, we're going to move on to South Carolina. South Carolina will go to President Donald Trump by 12 points or so, a margin of 55.3 to 43.2. Not really a surprise in the state of South Carolina. The state of Georgia, which has really close polling. In fact, Joe Biden's up in the polling. I actually think Donald Trump will win the state of Georgia by a very, very, very narrow margin, 49.5 to 49.1, or a 0.4% margin, the closest presidential margin in Georgia in a very, 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 very long time. I don't think it's ever been that close. It might be the closest in Georgia's history. Moving on down to the state of Florida, Donald Trump is actually down in the polls here by around 2 to 3 points, but some recent polls have actually shown him gaining. And I think due to the fact that Florida seems to be immune to blue wave years and national trends, I actually think the state of Florida will narrowly go to President Trump by a 0.6% margin, so actually slightly redder than Georgia, which I think is the way it's trending right now. The smaller margin is most likely due to Trump's failures with suburban and senior voters, but that's also upset by white working class voters and actually Cuban American voters, which will come out in favor of the president, enough for him to eke out a narrow victory in the important swing state of Florida. Next, we're going to go to the state of Alabama. No shock at all. President Trump will have no problem in the state of Alabama, winning it by 23.4%, 60.9 to 37.5. And of course, if we move over to the west to Mississippi, President Trump winning the state of Mississippi by 14.7 points, again winning this state very comfortably. Up in Tennessee, of course, again, no shock again, this is a safe red state. Donald Trump will win the state of Mississippi 59.4 to 38.9, a 20.5 margin of victory. Joe Biden not doing terrible in the state of Tennessee, doing a lot better than Hillary Clinton, but still not enough to even make the state close to competitive. Mitch McConnell's home state, the state of Kentucky, will also go to Donald Trump very comfortably, 62% to 36.3%, or a 25.7 margin of victory. Next, we'll move up to the state of Indiana. This state was once competitive back in the 2008 election, but has since moved drastically to the right, and it will stay that way. The state of Indiana will go to President Trump by 15.7%. Moving over to the east for a second, we're going to go to the state of Ohio. President Trump is currently up in the polls in the state of Ohio. That doesn't mean he's guaranteed to win it, but it is a very good sign considering Rust Belt polls do tend to undersample Republicans. We're going to project today that Donald Trump will win the state of Ohio by 4.1%. We haven't forgot the state of West Virginia. Donald Trump will also win the state of West Virginia overwhelmingly by 37.3%, or 67.7 to 30.4. Trump doing a little bit worse than his 2016 total, and Joe Biden doing a whole lot better. Next, we're going to move up to the state of Illinois. We're going to move out to the state of Illinois. We did West Virginia because we actually skipped it for some reason, so we're going to move out to Illinois now. Illinois will go to Joe Biden really comfortably, no shock to anyone, home to Chicago, 57.1 to 41.4, a 15.7% margin of victory. Next, we have the really important swing state of Wisconsin. Joe Biden has been up around 8 points in Wisconsin. Hillary Clinton was up around 5 or 6, depending on which polls you looked at. Donald Trump overperformed his polls by around 6 points or so, making the state very competitive. Some right-wing polls have had the results in Wisconsin in the margin of error, and I think Wisconsin will be very close, but I still give the edge to Joe Biden. I think Joe Biden is going to narrowly win the key state of Wisconsin by 0.9%, or 59.6 to 48.7. I think neither candidate is going to get a majority here, but it will be a very, very close state, and a state we all should be watching on election night. Next, we're going to move over to the state of Michigan. Again, another super important swing state in the 2020 election. Biden has been up very consistently in Michigan, around 7 or 8 points. This is where the Obama administration did the GM bailout. And based on the current polling, Joe Biden is very comfortable. Now, this prediction is actually underestimating a lot of the polls for Donald Trump. And I think that is going to be the result. You're going to see as this map fills in, it's going to be a lot closer than many people are saying it's going to be. This is not going to be a Joe Biden landslide. This is not going to be a Trump landslide. This is going to be a very close election. But with that being said, I think Joe Biden will win a lean victory in the state of Michigan, 50.8% to 47.5%. Donald Trump has put a lot of resources here, but he's been putting all of his effort in the state of Pennsylvania. And based on the state of the nation, I don't think it will be successful, but I could be wrong. I could be wrong on election night. But as of right now, Joe Biden will win the state of Michigan. That is our official prediction. Now we're going to move over to the state of Minnesota. This was home to violent riots back in May and a protest movement that spread across the country, which we don't really know who that benefited because polling didn't really change a whole lot. There were some snap polls after the George Floyd incident and the protests that followed that had Donald Trump doing better in the state, but polling in Minnesota is actually more favorable to Biden than it was for Hillary Clinton. And I think Biden is ultimately going to win the state pretty comfortably by around 5.2%. He's going to win the state 51.5 to 46.3. I don't think this is a state the Trump campaign should have spent a lot of time in. They should have really hammered home Wisconsin and Pennsylvania because those are two Rust Belt states. They could have won, but I don't think they'll be able to do it. I think they will fall a tiny bit short, and of course, we'll discuss why probably after the election, and we'll break it down either way the result turns out. Next, we're going to go down to the state of Iowa. Trump has regained his lead in the polls in Iowa, but very, very, very narrowly. He's only up by around less than a point. With that being said, though, a lot of right-wing polls have actually been very accurate. The Des Moines Register, I believe, released a really accurate poll in 2016, which predicted the result of Iowa pretty reliably. I think the state of Iowa, at the end of the day, will go to President Trump by around 7.3%. Polling in Iowa is really, really terrible. And, we saw in the primaries, we saw that also in 2016. I think Trump is going to overperform his polls quite a bit, and I think Joe Biden is going to underperform. Joe Biden didn't really spend a lot of time in this state, and it makes sense. It's only 6 electoral votes in a state that is likely to be in Donald Trump's favor anyway. However, President Trump will be the favorite at the end of the day, winning the state pretty handedly. Missouri, we're going to move on down to Missouri. No shock, Missouri will go to President Trump very comfortably by an 18-point margin. Missouri has only been trending to the right since the 2008 election. Claire McCaskill was knocked off as the incumbent Democratic senator in 2018. And of course, in 2016, Donald Trump won a large double-digit victory in the state. That trend of Missouri heading to the right will continue in the 2020 election. Of course, now if we go down to Arkansas, Arkansas also is not really going to be a shock to anyone. Donald Trump will win the state of Arkansas really handily, 62.6 to 35.6, a 27% margin of victory. Louisiana, again, no surprise to anyone, 58.9 to 39.6, Donald Trump with a 19.3% lead. It's actually hard to believe that back in 2008, Louisiana had 2 Democratic senators and also voted for a Democratic presidential candidate in 1996. So it's hard to believe that this state has shifted so far to the right, but I think it will continue to do so in that election. The Trump campaign has a lot of enthusiasm, and Trump's base is enthusiastic, and that will keep the state of Louisiana very safely in the red column. Now we're going to go to the state of Texas. There's been a lot of talk about the state of Texas possibly flipping, becoming a purple state now. Polls for Donald Trump have not been too great. He's only up by around 2%, and that's the highest in the aggregate. Of course, there are a lot of Democratic-leaning polls in that aggregate, but even if you take those out, he's probably only up by 4 or so. I think the polls are going to be somewhat right in this case. I think Donald Trump will win the state of Texas by a 3.8% margin, 51.1 to 47.3. It'll be the closest margin in Texas history since 1990. Well, not the closest margin in Texas history, my bad. The closest margin in Texas since Bob Dole won the state narrowly in 1996. Of course, we're going to move up to the state of Oklahoma, which is not at all contested. The state of Oklahoma will go to Donald Trump by 35.2 points. We can move up to the state of Kansas, which got a lot of noise for its Senate race, but on the presidential election, it will not really be close. Donald Trump will win the state of Kansas 57.5 to 40.6, so Joe Biden will overperform Hillary quite a bit. Donald Trump will do slightly better than his 2016 results, but the state ultimately shifting a tiny bit to the left, but still staying reliably Republican this time around. Next, we're going to move to the state of Nebraska. My Nebraska at-large result is Donald Trump winning the state by 61.5 percentage points to Joe Biden's 36.2 percentage points. Of course, if we go to Nebraska's 2nd district, I think Joe Biden will narrowly pick off Nebraska's 2nd district. At the same time, Don Bacon will also win his congressional seat. I think this is a unique election. I think Joe Biden does have the edge in the suburbs, and I think that will narrowly carry him to victory in Nebraska's 2nd district, the first time the district has gone blue since 2008. Of course, we have both of the Dakotas, and by nobody's surprise, South Dakota going to Donald Trump 63.3 to 35.2, a 28-point margin of victory. And of course, North Dakota, a 32-point margin of victory. No shock to anybody. Of course, we're going to move over to the state of Montana. Steve Bullock has been running a very competitive Senate race there. However, on the presidential level, there's been no serious effort by the Biden campaign to win the state. And of course, it makes sense. It's only 3 electoral votes, and it's heavily leaning in Trump's direction anyway. Trump's only up around 8 or 9 in the polling aggregate, but I think, honestly, polling in safe states is really unreliable. My prediction is Donald Trump will win the state of Montana 56.7 to 40.9, a 15.8 margin of victory, a little bit lower than his margin of victory in 2016, Montana moving to the left, but ultimately still going comfortably to Donald Trump. The state of Wyoming, to no one's surprise, will be the reddest state in the country, going to Donald Trump by 48.5%. Joe Biden barely getting a quarter of the vote. In fact, he doesn't even get a quarter of the vote, 24.2% to Donald Trump's 72.7%. Next, we have the state of Colorado. Colorado has a not-so-competitive Senate race between John Hickenlooper and Cory Gardner. Cory Gardner is going to lose his re-election. I think that's a foregone conclusion. Likewise, Donald Trump will not carry the state as he didn't last time. My official prediction is Colorado will go to Joe Biden by around 10.1% or a very high likely margin. Next, the state of New Mexico. This is the state I've actually changed my prediction on a tiny bit. Given Trump's increased support with Latinos, which I think will actually happen as white suburbanites move a little bit to the left. I think Latinos will continue to move a tiny bit more in favor of the Republicans. New Mexico, likewise, will also get closer, and I think New Mexico will go to Joe Biden, but only by around 9.2%. So doing a little bit better than Hillary Clinton, but Donald Trump doing much better than his 40% last time. Now we're going to move on down to the state of Hawaii. Hawaii, no shock. Joe Biden will win the state of Hawaii by around 30.8%, or somewhere in that ballpark. It's not even going to be close. Of course, we also have the state of Alaska, and of course, no shock to anyone, Donald Trump will win the state of Alaska by around 13 points or so. This is still safe by my characterization, but Alaska is certainly getting more friendly to Democrats and the Democratic Party, but that could just be fatigue for electing Republicans consistently since 1964. But that trend is not going to break in 2020, and Donald Trump is still going to win the state of Alaska, no problem. Next, we go to the crucial battleground, Arizona. Arizona was a state Trump won by 3.6 percentage points in the last election, the same margin he won the state of North Carolina. Polling for him in Arizona has actually approved Donald Trump is only down by around 3 to 2 points, 2 to 3 points, I mean. But unlike the state of North Carolina, Arizona's polling tends to be a lot more accurate, and I project that Joe Biden will actually win the state of Arizona by 0.6%. Which is a very, very narrow margin. Of course, that result being 49.5 for Joe Biden and 48.9 for Donald Trump. Honestly, this is a state that's been trending heavily to the left. I don't think this comes as much of a surprise. Again, Donald Trump can still win the state of Arizona, but as of right now, I don't really see it being possible. I think Martha McSally really does hurt the Trump ticket, and I also think Trump has really hurt himself with his COVID response, especially in the state of Arizona, which had a huge outbreak. If you ask any of the swing voters, who swung from Trump and are now going to vote for Biden. That is the reason they cite. It's usually not his personality, it's usually the coronavirus response, and I think that is what killed him in the state of Arizona. The state of Utah, the homeland of Mormonism and Mitt Romney, will go to Donald Trump by 15.3%, a 56 to 40 margin, a 15.3 margin of victory for the president. I think the reason why Donald Trump didn't do better in the state of Utah is that most people from Utah aren't really fond of the president's character and the way he conducts himself, even if they agree with most of his policies. I think some of them will vote for Joe Biden just out of spite, but I think it's not going to be enough to move this state in any significant direction. I think in future elections, the state will become more Republican, but for now, it'll only go to Trump by 15, but that is still a safe margin, and he will win it pretty handily. Next, we're going to move over to the state of Nevada. This state could be really interesting on election night, especially with Trump's increased margins with Latinos. Joe Biden actually made a few campaign stops in the state of Nevada recently, and it did vote to the right of the nation in 2018. With that being said, though, Joe Biden has been up around 10 to 12% in the polling. So it's no surprise that we have Joe Biden winning the state of Nevada by around 3.1%. I think it will be that close. I think Joe Biden is really going to have a run for his money in the state. A 50.5 to 47.4 margin is fairly close, but I think Joe Biden will win the state when it's all said and done. The state of Idaho, of course, this is the last Republican state on our projection, and no shock, Donald Trump will win the state 62.3 to 36 points, to nobody's surprise. Now, of course, we're going to have the West Coast. Washington will go to Joe Biden 57.2 to 40.2, a 17-point lead. The state of Oregon will go to Joe Biden 55.4 to 41.5, a 13.9% margin. And of course, the state of California will go to President Donald Trump. Just kidding. It will go to Joe Biden, 62.6 to 35.5, a 27-point margin of victory. And with that, Joe Biden will be the next president of the United States. These are going to be the final results. 290 electoral votes for Joe Biden and 248 electoral votes for President Trump. The final popular vote, Joe Biden garnering 51.8% of the popular vote, or 77 million votes, to Donald Trump's 47.1% of the popular vote. So this election is going to be close in both regards. It's going to be close on the popular vote, and it's going to be close in the Electoral College. But this is the official prediction from me, the Populist New Yorker, for the 2020 election. Of course, leave your comments and suggestions down below. I hope to see all of you on election night. Please be sure to check out the stream. We'll be covering the election live, and we'll see how right or wrong I was. Please be sure to leave this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Please comment down below if you have any suggestions or you disagree with my prediction, you want to tell me. Give me some feedback in the comments down below. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell notification so you don't miss any more videos I post, and I hope to see you in the next one. Please be sure to get out and vote, and the next time I upload a regular video, it will be after the election. So I'll be doing the stream, and then I'll go back to regular videos, and we'll talk about what happened during the election. So I look forward to that. So thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.